If you are using CC 2013 to 2018, then this section about the puppet tools is for you. If you are using CC 2019, please skip to the next section. You could go through this section and it's very useful and you will learn a lot. The next section will summarize everything for CC 2019. And welcome to puppeteering. After Effects has a puppet tool that will allow you to create animations through distortions. It's mainly used to distort and animate images with transparent background, but yet you can also use it on any other layer. In this section, you will learn all about the puppet tools. You will learn how to set your pins and understand how puppet pins interact, how to use the mesh and all its properties, how to work with the overlap and stars tool. You will also learn how to animate the puppet pins and how to record an animation using the puppet tool built-in animation recorder. Welcome to the first lecture in puppet tools. The first thing you have to do is set up a good workspace and decide what kind of images you want to work with. So here I chose the animation workspace. If you don't have it on this line, most probably you don't. You can come to your double arrow over here and you will find animation here. Click on this workspace and sometimes it comes messy on the right side here. So you can just twirl them up, by clicking on them, as simple as this. And we don't need the audio, you can just close the audio. We need the smoother. I will do a simple change here to accommodate the size of the composition. I will take the composition panel, click on it and drag it and just put it on the extreme right, where you're supposed to have a green line from top to bottom. If you release, here you are now, the composition panel is on your left and it's cool to work like this. Now let's make it a bit smaller. Let's create a new composition. I will use the tiger. The tiger is a PNG image, as you can see. It has no background. The background is transparent. So I'll click and drag and create a new comp. How about if you make it only 20 seconds? So I click here and write 2000, that will be 20 seconds. And then we bring the work area end to the timeline indicator and trim the comp to the work area. We have now only 20 seconds we can animate during this time. Let's look at our composition. I have now the transparency on. If I put it off, you can see the background of the composition. Let's make the image a bit smaller. I press Shift and stretch it down. Now with the transparency, you can see that the image does not have any background. This is the kind of images that you will animate with the puppet tool. After all, it's called puppet tool, so you are puppeteering somehow, so you need some characters with no background. The puppet tool will always work on the alpha channel. If you remember about the alpha channel, we mentioned it several times. If you come to the colors here, show channel and color management setting, you can, for example, select the red, and you are seeing here the red colors within this image. The black ones, there is a lot of red. The gray is not much red. That's the concept. The white might be no red at all. If you go, for example, for the green, you can see the same. This is the amount of greens that you have within the images. If you go now to the alpha channel, that's the most interesting. It will show you all the pixels that are not transparent. These are the one in white. And in black, you have all the transparent pixels. The puppet tool will work on the alpha channel and disregard whatever is transparent. And this is very important. Otherwise, you're animating a whole image, a square or rectangular image. Sometimes it's useful, but not all the time. It's actually a puppet tool. Cool. Let's go back to RGB. I'll toggle transparency. Now that we have set up our workspace and our image, in the next lecture, we start using the puppet tool and see exactly how it works. In this lecture, guys, you are going to explore the puppet pin tool. If you want to follow along with me, please open the file puppettools-start.aep. At the end of this section, you can open puppettools-final.aep and see exactly how we have done the work. For now, I would like you to follow along and we'll do the work together. Remember, in the previous lecture, we have created our tiger composition and we want now to start working with the puppet pin. If you come to the puppet pin tool and long click, You have 3 puppet tools that you can use. The first one is puppet pin tool, and it will create pins for you that you can animate. We'll see that. And you have the stars tool and the overlap tool that we'll see in the next lectures. I will select now the puppet pin tool. The mouse pointer now is a puppet pin. So what's the concept of the pin tool? With the pin tool, you will add pins to your image that will act like anchor points somehow, and you can animate these pins and create deformations or distortions, if you like, in your image. Done properly, you will get very nice animation. Now, as soon as you selected the pin tool, you notice there is mesh here and it says show. So I can check it off. It says no show for the mesh. I'll put it on now. Please put it on. And you have here expansion and density. Now we'll see about this as we work. Let's add the first pin. For example, I'll come to the end of the tail here and click. I added a pin. But in the same time, a mesh has been created that has an expansion of 5 and a density of 12. We'll talk later about expansion and density. Okay, you can come and change these ones. Having set the first pin, if you point on the pin, you notice that the mouse pointer will change into a kind of a move pointer. You can click on it and start moving it around. Notice that you are not moving the image. You notice the delimiters of the image over here. The image is not moving. You are actually only moving the mesh that has been created. So actually this pin is very useful to start moving the image instead of using the anchor point, but that's not the point. The point is to add another pin. Let's add it on the end of the tail just over here. We have 2 pins. One will act as an anchor for the second one. For example, if I select the second one, I click on it and start moving. Notice that the second pin is somehow acting as an anchor. And notice how the tail is being distorted. You see how? So you're actually moving the mesh. Remember that. So there is some distortion. For example, we come over here. Okay, I will undo this. If you select the pin at the beginning of the tail and move it, notice the other pin is acting as an anchor, and there is quite some distortion for the area that is being moved. That's the tail. It's being distorted. So the pins will act as anchors for each other. Cool. So let's add one on the bottom of the feet, just like this, and hold the tail and see what happens. Now you notice all the other pins, it doesn't matter how many there are acting as anchor point for this one that I'm moving around, for this pin I'm moving around. Fine, let's undo. Let's add more. Let's add a pin over here on the shoulders, because later on you might want to use the hands. And I will add one just in the middle here, and another one on the palm here, and maybe one on the head, okay, and one on the neck. Maybe I will see if it works. I will hold now the tail and move it. So notice now all other anchors are acting as anchor points and are not moving. Pretty interesting, right, guys? Okay, but also there is some kind of nice distortion that's happening to the legs, and in our case here it makes sense. Not always the distortion works, the way you would like. Sometimes it's like bending things and so on, and this is the object of the mesh itself. Let's look now at the timeline. What happened inside the timeline? Let's take it up over here. And we have an effect that is applied. So the puppet tool is an effect. Pretty interesting. And we have here the puppet engine. Now guys, if you are in CC 2018 and onward, the puppet engine will appear. And you have 2 options: the legacy, the old system before 2018, and the advanced that we will use in 2018. And we have here mesh 1. This is the mesh we have been working on. And you have the compositing options as usual for any effect. Let's turn down mesh 1. So you have now set the density for mesh 1 and the expansion for mesh 1. So inside mesh 1 you have deform. If I twirl down, you will notice you have all the pins. So what's the concept here? What happened? By setting the first pin, you have created a mesh, if you remember, that has a density and expansion with certain values. And the group deform has been created where you have all the pins. And that's not all, guys. If you move the time indicator here, you will notice that for every pin, a keyframe has been created. You see, all of them have keyframes. If you scroll down puppet pin 10, you will have the pin type, which is either position or start. In this case, we have put a position pin. So we have position over here, and the position is keyframed at a certain value, and you have your keyframe. So if you select your layer, press U to see all the keyframes, you notice that you have a position keyframe for every pin that you have created. And it means that you can start animating your pins. And this is what we'll do in the next lecture. In the previous lecture, we have set up our pins. Okay, I put them anywhere that I found convenient. You can come back and change them the way you would like. And we had a mesh one, which is density at 12. Please set it at 12 and the expansion make it 5. That's very cool. We'll talk about mesh and expansion in the next lecture. That will be better. For now, I would like you to start animating. It's very simple to animate the pins. It's even easier than animating the position. Remember that when we created a pin, immediately a keyframe has been created where the time indicator was. I was at 0, 0, and all the keyframes were created at 0, 0. So from now on, you are very attentive to where is the time indicator when you're creating a pin. Let's come at half a second, that's 12 frames, and start, for example, moving this hand. Click and drag it up. Now notice what's happening here. You have a motion path already, a Bezier, because I did the setting for Bezier, and then you can manipulate the motion path as easy as I'm showing you. At the same time over here, I will just animate the second hand up over here. Now notice the keyframes are being created according to the pin. Now if you don't like the pin name here, you can always deselect. Click on the pin name only, press enter and say, for example, this is the left hand. That is, if you're doing some complicated animations, yes, it's good to rename them. Then let's take the tail at half a second and animate it, for example, also up. The guy is very happy. Okay, he's a tiger. Okay, now we can animate the feet just like this. One is over here and the other one comes in. Okay, we go to 1 second. Here you are. And then we, for example, return them to where they were. Okay, notice the distortions here, how it's happening. Okay, it's quite cool, by the way. The mesh is excellent. See, all the distortions are according to the mesh. Here I am. I animated the tail now. And let's take this hand and just put it over here. And this one, we just take it down. Here you are. Now, even you can select all the keyframes if you like and press F9 to easy ease them. So let's play our animation now. See exactly what's happening. Pretty cool. Nice. So now you animated the tiger. Now if you want to continue the animation, you move down the timeline, you select a pin and you change its position. You do whatever you like with the position. Let's put them down here, for example. The tail, let's put it in. The feet, let's put them back. Okay, and so on, half a second or even sometimes, frame by frame, you would animate your puppet just like this. It's very nice, by the way, because it's satisfying when you finish the animation. I will deselect everything to see it. Wow, our guy is very nicely being animated. So actually, this is the concept of animating the pins one at a time using the keyframes and the position. But there is a better way to animate, and it is the record option over here. We see that in the next lecture. In the previous lecture, guys, you animated our famous tiger here, a pin at a time, okay? And you created keyframes every half a second or so, and you had a motion path that you could just move around. This technique is excellent when you know exactly what kind of animation you want. And you know the precise position of the pins for every half a second in this example. But how about if you want to create a bit random? You have, a direction of the animation. You have a concept of it. But it's not important to know that at half second it has to be in this position or the other position. It's a bit random, kind of random. How would you create such an animation for, let's say, 7 seconds? Let me show you an example. I will select tiger and Ctrl D. I will duplicate it. Open tiger. And here I'm going to select all the keyframes, all of them. and make sure the time indicator is at the beginning and delete them. Then click on one of the position and you have the keyframes back at the initial position. So what I would like to do is to move the tail, for example, left and right, up and down, just randomly. How would I do that? Well, there is a great option when you come to the puppet pin tool. You can see here there is record options. Let's click on it. Record options will allow you to hold down the control key while dragging a puppet pin to record animation. It will record the animation through keyframes. So every time you move it somewhere, it will create keyframes. Then the speed is at 50%, meaning the time here lapse is not going to run at 100% as normal time. It's going to play every 1 second in 2 seconds. So it's going to play at 50% of the normal speed. The smoothing at 10. It's going to create lots of keyframes here for every time you move. If you put the smoothing, for example, at 1, it will be a keyframe every frame almost, and all the motion path will be straight lines. Smoothing at 10 will reduce the number of keyframes and will make sure that the motion path is somehow a bit non-linear. You can increase this to whatever figure you want. In fact, you can go so up high. I will leave it at 10 to show you later on how to smooth it even further. Use draft deformation. If you check this one, you will see a kind of contour around what you're animating. Now, you can show the mesh or not. I would prefer not to show the mesh because it should be too much graphic here and I might miss where I'm going. I will click OK. Before we start animating, let's reduce the timeline because this guy will go to the end of the composition. I don't want to go to 20 seconds. So I will go to, for example, 7 seconds. That's enough. Press N and then trim comp to work area. I'm cool with 7 seconds. Of course, guys, remember to take back the timeline indicator to the beginning. Now I'll come over here and point at the pin, press Ctrl, and hopefully you can see that the mouse pointer I changed into a black arrow and a stopwatch. As soon as I start moving, it's going to start recording at half the speed, 50%. So now I will start moving the tail. Okay, I can release now the control or the command on the Mac and notice how it's running in the timeline at half a speed, and I'm moving this and it's recording everything. When it comes to the end of the comp, it will stop. Notice that's created so many keyframes for you. Let's play the animation. Let's deselect first so we can see it and play the animation. Now I went up, left, right. Pretty cool, right, guys? Well, if you were focusing at 100%, you could have gotten a better animation even. So now it has a huge number of keyframes. We will learn how to smooth it even better. Fine, let's animate the hands now. How about if I could animate both pins at the same time? Let's press Shift and select the second pin. Now both of them selected. And the time indicator is at the beginning. I press Ctrl or Command on the Mac and bring the pointer to one of the pins. Then as soon as I'm going to move, it's going to start recording. Watch it, guys. Here you are. Now they're going up, down, or left, right. Hey, he's very happy, this guy, up, down. Very nice. Even 7 seconds is a very long time to do this. But actually, you get the point. Okay, here you are. Let's play. I deselect F2. And notice the tail, of course, was moving. If you remember, we could see the contour. And both pins here have been animated. This is very nice animation. The way it's going left and right together. Very synchronized and very beautiful animation. Let's play more. Would you like to play more, guys? Let's select now the two pins over here. Okay, I selected the first one. Press Shift to select the second one. Press Ctrl or Command on the Mac. Make sure the time indicated at the beginning. I'm gonna start moving left and right. You notice you can see all the other pins moving. Very cool animation. Here you are. Then let's make him jump. He's happy. Hey, he has won the football match. Whatever you like, guys. It's a random animation. I will release. I released a bit too early. Notice the jump over here. Press F2 to deselect again. Here you are. Now everything is moving very nicely. Now you notice here there are so many keyframes. And sometimes you don't want that. you want sometimes to see the motion path, to work on it a bit. So the only way is to reduce the keyframes. And this is what you are going to do in the next lecture using the smoother. In the previous lecture, guys, we created this random motion using the recorder. And as you notice, you have lots of keyframes here. The number is huge. Well, if you're happy from the animation, then it's okay. But if you're not, and you want to reduce a bit the keyframes to make it smoother and work on your motion path, then there is a very simple solution. The solution is to use the smoother. The smoother is a panel. If you now have it around here, just come to window and you have a smoother over here. Make sure it's checked. To use the smoother, you need to select a property with at least 2 keyframes. Then in the smoother here, you have 2 options. You want to apply to spatial path or temporal graph. We don't have a temporal graph yet, so we will stick to spatial, and you can decide on the tolerance. Remember, when we used the record here option, we had the tolerance or the smoothing here at 10. It's also the tolerance. Here it's set at 100 for me. You might say, okay, I want it at 50. Meaning you want to use the tolerance of 50 to reduce the number of keyframes and maybe smoothen the path. I will click on apply, and you notice that the number of keyframes has been reduced. Not so much, but you still have a nice motion path. Okay, somehow. Fine. Let's go back. I will undo this one and let's put it at 200, for example. When you increase the value of the tolerance will become very stiff and it will reduce quite some keyframes. Here you are. Notice now I have only 4. Well, if this is, you like this animation, then you're cool with 200. Okay, but there is a big jump over here that you can see is a very smooth one coming up. Okay, this is no good, so I will undo and go for a tolerance of 150 and apply. So this is much better. Now, if you want to readjust the keyframes here, if you are in a movement, notice this guy now is coming very slow, something like this. You can select all your keyframes except the last one, press the Alt or the Option key on the Mac, click on the rightmost or the leftmost from the selected keyframes and drag. Here you are. Notice it's moving the keyframes, but it's spacing them somehow uniformly. Okay, if you play your animation now, you notice it has become a bit better. Actually, it's a matter of your choice and how you want things to happen in this animation. Unfortunately, the smoother here does not work on 2 properties. If I press Ctrl and select another position, it's gonna gray out. It won't work. So you need to go a property at a time. And I will apply again. I'm cool with this one. Select all the keyframes, press Alt and just move them over here. Then do the same for this property, apply. Well, unfortunately here it has removed all the keyframes except the first and the last one. Well, this is how it sees it, like this motion is very small, it doesn't deserve any keyframes. So you will undo and reduce the tolerance. I will take it down to 50, for example. See exactly how it's gonna happen. There is no way to predict how it's gonna go. Okay, here you are. Well, it's still very high. I'm gonna apply it again. It's not working. This is the maximum I can get with tolerance 50. Let's go to the second one, apply again. Okay, that's cool. Let's go to the last one and apply. Here you are, apply again. Okay, this guy needs maybe 100 and let's apply, see exactly. That's not bad. The animation here is pretty complex. You notice that the movement by itself in general did not change. Some keyframes, mainly the intermediate keyframes, have been removed. Notice you still have the last one and the first one to complete the motion pass the way you have done it, but some intermediate keyframes have been removed. Here you are. So this is how you smoothen your animation and you reduce the number of keyframes. So guys, this is about smoothing your motion path and reducing the number of keyframes, and now you can come and adjust your motion path if you would like to. In the previous lecture, guys, we have worked with the mesh and the pins, but I did not explain about the mesh because I think it's important that you understand the pins, how is the animation going, and then start working with the mesh and see exactly the effect of the mesh on your character or your PNG and your animation. I will take here the alien.png, which will deform a bit worse than the tiger here. I will create a new composition. Here you are. Using the selection tool, you can click and just make it a bit smaller. Let's go for the pin tool. And I will set the expansion at 5 like it was in the previous lecture and density to the maximum, which is 12. And start putting the pins here. I'll put the first pin and one on the neck and another one on the hands. Here you are. And then on the legs, okay, and one in the middle, just to show you. Now, you see these triangles. This is the mesh. These triangles are used to create the deformation. Now, try to imagine how do you want to deform this guy if you move a pin? Well, the only way is to create a mesh and to deform the triangles inside the mesh. It's really a very big algorithm. It's used even in structural engineering. So when you deform, it's the triangles inside the mesh that are deformed. You notice how? And they decide how the shape will be. Notice the deformation here of the triangles. Cool, I will undo this. For a density of 12, it means this is the highest number of triangles that you are going to have in a certain PNG image or a certain character. If you're not working on CC 2018, you will find here triangles. So you can put it at 1500 triangle. That will be equivalent to density 12. But density makes a lot of sense, much more than the number of triangles, because deciding how many triangles was really a tedious task. Here, deciding on the density is much easier. It goes from 0 to 12. Let's reduce the density. I will exaggerate and take it to 0. Now, you still have some triangles all over the place. Of course, you still have a mesh. But now, if you move, notice how coarse or rough is the deformation. You notice here it's almost going into rectangles and stories like this. So, having fewer rectangles will make the deformation a bit coarse with some straight angles that maybe that's what you want in your animation. Okay, guys, don't take it like, no, I want 12. Maybe this is cool for you. I don't know. Here, look at the head, how it's transforming. It's not bad, by the way. Let's undo this. Let's put the density, for example, at 5. And here you have more triangles, in some places, in fact. And the deformation is not that coarse, as much as 0, and not that smooth, as much as 12. So deciding on the density of the mesh is pretty important before you start your animation. Within the timeline here, you have the mesh, you have the density and the expansion, and I bring it to your attention, it is not keyframeable, meaning it's set, you start your animation. Then if you change it, it's set for the whole animation. Let's take back the density to 12. So we have the maximum number of triangles, and let's look at expansion. I will zoom in a bit. When the expansion is 5, you notice that the mesh is outside the shape itself or the alpha channel. Remember the alpha channel? The mesh is outside the alpha channel by 5 pixels. I'm not sure if this is 5 pixels. It looks like more, but we can say 5 pixels. Let's go back to RGB. When you deform here, it will take these 5 pixels in consideration and deform accordingly. Look at the area over here. It has a triangle that is almost joining with the arm and the chest itself. If I move it, notice it's deforming over here, the chest and the arm all together. You can take the expansion to 0. And now the mesh is exiting by 0 pixel, just around the contour of the alpha channel. Here you are. And the deformation will change a bit. Not much. Between 5 and 0, not much. Cool. You notice also under the arm now, there is not as much deformation as the expansion being at 5. I will undo both. Now, let's take the expansion, for example, to 15. I think it will work. Yeah, that's good. If I click and drag here, notice now the hands have been joined with the hips and so on. So the mesh has expanded 15 pixels all around your alpha channel or the image itself. So now you have joined here the hand with the chest and the legs, and any deformation to one pin will also try to deform everything according to the mesh. And this side, no, it didn't happen. After Effects, managed to put the hand aside. Notice here the triangles, the deformation here. It could be better, it could be worse, depending on what you're trying to do. Of course, there is no right or wrong here. You have just to make sure that your mesh, the density, and the expansion are correct. So actually, I invite you to come and play with the expansion and the density and, experiment. Take the tiger again, play with it. Take the maple over here and try to play with it and see exactly how expansion and density will work for you. Okay guys, it's up to you now to go and test and try and see exactly how the mesh will work with the expansion and the density and how you could animate with more expansion and more density. And I hope you enjoyed the previous lectures about the puppet pin. Let's explore more and find out how we can use the puppet overlap tool. I will put the mesh off. I will take one of the pin and I want you to notice how the mesh was created and how the triangles are operating in comparison to each other. If you click and drag and bring it over here, you notice that this hand is somehow getting mixed by triangle with the other pixels over here or the other triangles. Notice that it's neither in front or in the back. It's just somehow in between, on top and behind. If you go down, it's 100% behind the feet. Okay. If you come to the hand here, it's behind the hand. And here it's getting totally mixed up. So how did this happen? First of all, when you put your first pin, a mesh has been created. And this mesh had all these triangles. Which triangle is in front and which triangle is in the back? After Effects tried to decide at its best which are the triangles that are in front or the one in the back. But this guessing of After Effects after taking a flat image and cutting it into triangles and deciding which one comes in front or which one comes in the back is not very accurate, as you can see here. But it has done a great job. You have to admit it, it's a great job. That's why there is the Puppet Overlap tool to help us identify which triangles come in front and which one comes in the back. The Puppet Pin tool has two properties here, the in front and the extend. I put in front to 50%, I was trying a few things, and the extend to 50. 50% is the default, and extend 50 I think is the default, I don't know, maybe you have a different figure. Nevertheless, well, if you notice 50% in front is also 50% in the back. So now After Effects with 50%, it's guessing which one is in front and which one in the back. Let's help him. Let's take the pin overlap and create an overlap pin just over here. Overlap pin is usually blue. And what you see in the white over here is the extend. So you put the pin and it has extended 50 all around. Okay? This is just a figure, it's not 50 pixels. Now it's 50% in front. You can make it, for example, 100% or 150% in front. Notice how the white color here became a bit whiter. I'm going to take it up more, and you notice the white becomes a bit whiter, just a bit. Now, extend of 50, so the pin now is at 107%. And with this pin, there is an extend of 50 that are also at 107%. You can increase the extend. Here you are. Notice what's happening in the tool. Okay, you see how it's increasing? You can increase it more. And you can also move it. So this pin, with all the white triangles around, it's the extend, and now at 107% in front. Fine. Let's take now the Puppet Pin tool, click and put it on top. Let's remove the mesh to see it very well. And let's see what happened here. You notice that wherever you had conflict is no more, because now this area is 107% in front and the others are 50% in front. Here you are, you fixed it. But maybe sometimes, everywhere we're going is very cool, except over here you have a problem, so you need to decide. Let's take the other hand and put it just in front and see if there is a conflict. Actually, there is a conflict over here. of course, and there is maybe a conflict, yes. Notice how it's jumping from front to the back, okay? I guess it is in the back of the feet, but it is in front of the body. So let's take now this hand and make it in the back. I will go to the Puppet Overlap tool and put a pin just over here. Don't put the pin here because there is extend. So just try to put it in a good area. It has inherited the previous values. I will put it, for example, at 0 to start with, and I think the extent is cool. Then I'm starting to take it negatively. Notice what's going to happen. It went dark. Dark meaning it's in the back and the in front is negative. Here you are. I'm going to extend it or move the pin a bit up, I think. Yes, just over here. So everything is covered. Okay. And then go for the pin tool now. And just scrub it around to see, is it in the back at 100%? Well, actually, it is in the back now. And this is pretty cool. So if you have any conflict area, you can fix it with the Puppet Overlap tool. Now let's check what happened in the timeline. If I go to the Puppet Overlap tool and select this pin, it's over here. Come to the mesh over here. There is no pin, if you notice, for the overlap. So the overlap, you cannot animate it. There is no pin for it. There is only a pin for position and starching. So this is the overlap. It's pretty easy, pretty simple. Usually what you do, first you work on your overlaps, then you work on the animation. Or you can work the animation and start struggling with the overlap, what comes in front, what comes in the back. Within the Puppet tools, we have now the Starch tools. Now, a word of warning for everybody who is not using CC 2018. The Starch tool has been upgraded, and in this version, it's really working as a Starch tool. It used to be a tool to render certain areas very rigid. But now it's really working like starching. Starching is similar to stiffening. It means when you use the Starch tool on certain areas, they stiffen. They still are distorted, but they are less distorted than the normal areas. Let's try it. Let's take this hand over here, okay? If you take the pin and move it up, you notice how the hand is all being distorted here and it's almost compressing on itself. Now let's go and use the Starch tool on the hand. I will take the Starch tool and just put a single pin just next to the yellow here. Now notice the change in the triangles here. They changed the formation and you have more density on this side, for example, and this side, and less density around the starch pin. Now, if you try to move, you will notice that the area covered by the starch pin is becoming a bit stiff. It's still being distorted, but it is stiffer than the other areas. Prior to 2018, this area will become 100% rigid. Now it's becoming really stiff and not rigid. You can, for example, add another pin just over here. I will undo again. I will just add another pin just over here. Okay. Now notice that there is more density on this area and this area here. So there is compensation now for the stiffness in the area where you have very many triangles. Meaning they're going to distort, but not that much because the triangles are very small. Notice what's happening here. You have more rigidity on the pins, wherever they are, and somehow less rigidity where there is a high density of triangles. And notice how it's moving now. Now, sometimes you might be tempted to do like this, put pins everywhere. What happens here is the density of the triangles is very high. It will be stiff, but not that stiff. You notice you can still bend it, but it's really stiff a bit. So this is about starching. So you make the areas around the starch pin a bit stiff and they are not distorting as much. And if they do distort, they are distorting very minimum because of the density of the triangles. So this is one way to make certain areas not distort so much or to stiffen certain areas. That's all I can tell you about the Starch tool. You need to experience it, and depending on your character, it will be useful or not. Thank you. I'll see you in the next lecture.